What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another week of the Jeezy Chop Shop podcast. And you probably have noticed I'm missing Daniel. He's not here. No, I did not kick him off the show. He just had some things he had to take care of. So he's unfortunately not here this week, but he will be back in a future episode. So unfortunately, you guys are just stuck with me. I know, tough, but I have an amazing episode for you nonetheless. Today, I have two amazing gentlemen on the podcast. You are very familiar with their work. You have seen it in the likes of The Division, Ghost Recon Wildlands, Breakpoint, Dying Light 2, and more. These talented veterans are bringing their years of experience to their own upcoming game, Victory's Grave Outflank. Here today from Old Glory Studios, our executive producer, Lewis Manalo, and creative director, Matt Patak. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. As I always like to start with a little story, when I got the email from your team, I was floored. I was like, nah, this can't be real. Anytime I get those kind of emails, I'm like, nah, no way. Because as I was telling you guys before the show, I'm a huge Clancyverse fan. I got my start with the Nintendo 64 version of Rainbow Six.
That's right.
And I was hooked after that. Like, I never looked back. And I was playing Splinter Cell. I played Chaos Theory, Conviction, Blacklist. I got into the Ghost Recon, and Wildlands is my absolute favorite.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I thought the story was amazing. I remember I was playing it religiously through 2017 with my friends. And I always thought to myself, I said, in those levels, when we were getting our butts kicked, who was at fault for some of those levels? Because like I said, the world was so immersive. It was so good that we actually had to apply real tactics. Like my buddy was SRF. So he was like, hold on, we got to approach this differently. Like we got to approach this with that mindset. And getting to sit down and talk with you guys is like, like I said, I was like, it's like talking to celebrities, because as a gamer, we don't always get to connect with the faces behind the stories that we're given. We get the product and we don't get to realize how much work and effort was put into it. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Nice, us too.
So I know a lot of people are probably curious on how you guys got started. So Lewis, we'll start with you. How did you go from military to gaming? Like how did that happen?
All right. Well, it was not on purpose. It was kind of an accident, honestly. But I enlisted after September 11th. You know, I lived in Jersey City on September 11th, so I was like literally across the Hudson River when the World Trade Centers fell. I watched that from my apartment window, right? But before that, I'd already been working in film and television industry, and also writing some. So when I got out in 2004, after a couple deployments, I tried to get back into it. It's never like a straight line, like I'm sure, like after you get out, like finding out like where it is you're going to fit in or what it is you're going to do. But eventually I found myself producing some independent documentaries that were shot in South America, mostly in the Amazon River Basin. But then I also was still writing. So I wrote a play about like a bunch of soldiers like stuck on a mountain in Afghanistan. And an old friend of mine came to a reading of that play. That was a few months later, he called me up and was like, hey, I'm working on this game about these soldiers in South America. I know you were a soldier and you've been to South America. You want to help us write some stuff? And that's how I got into the game industry. And that guy was Sam Strackman, narrative director on Ghost Recon Wildlands. So then, basically I ended up doing a lot of heavy lifting for writing the dialogue and a lot of the cutscenes that are in there. So then after, they started working on the next game, Breakpoint, that's when they kind of asked me to be the lead writer. So and then I've just kind of stuck with the industry since. So
nice. And Matt, what about you?
Yeah, I've always had the passion to be in games since I was a kid. Like middle school, I think, is when I really even considered the idea of making games as a career. But yeah, like Lewis, 9/11 happened, and it kind of changed everything for me. Had to sign up while I was in. You know, a lot of guys in the barracks and stuff. We'd do LAN parties and stuff, like just kind of like, you know, just game it up together and like, you know, just have this all-nighter session, just purely just chaos gaming. But yeah, I always knew that I wanted to get back into like at least get into making games. So I looked for schools while I was in the military. So I kind of already had a plan for what I wanted to do when I got out. And I went to school for game design, found out during this process of learning all of game design that I was really good at level design. So I made a level design portfolio and got my first job at Crytek, moved to Europe. Never in my life did I ever think I'd be even living in Europe. And I, never visited. And there I was working and living in Europe. And after Crytek, landed a job at Ubisoft working on the Division 1, the DLCs in between there, and Division 2, and the DLC after that. So it's been a long career.
Yeah. And that's amazing because, the Clancyverse is decades, as
Yeah.
I was saying, telling you guys, I got my start with Rainbow Six, back on the N64. And I know that a lot of the work is inspired by, Tom Clancy's writing. How much of that is used in the modern games for reference, for
Well, like the current games now, like it's like there's definitely been they strayed away from that authenticity stuff. You know what I mean? Like like what they have like droids in Rainbow Six Siege now and stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So and even in Breakpoint, that was really when, at least from my perspective, where the transition kind of towards a little more sci-fi and a little less, because Tom Clancy was always great about his writing. It's always great about the Clancyverse. It's always just like a little bit ahead into the future. You know what I mean? So like you go back to Red October. Like there was like something that was a submarine that was just a little bit more advanced than what everybody else had,
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, now with Breakpoint, it's now we see that, okay, there are actually going to be drones and robots
Yeah.
all over the battlefield. You know what I mean? If you watch that footage in Ukraine, like half of that stuff has to do with drones, right? But at the time, a lot of the way it was presented, like with the wolves, like they look pretty badass, but like at the same time, like walking around with like a metal like face mask is not exactly tactical either. So it's kind of drifted away, I think. We definitely tried to keep it in Breakpoint. And I don't know, Matt, how you feel about in the Division, but I think there's a lot of elements there that are, again, with the Clancy, like just one or two steps. I think it's supposed to be like 5 to 7 years ahead of where we are now. It's like what like the Clancyverse kind of aesthetic or the idea of it is really supposed to be. So it's more like speculative than actually science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
But like some of the stuff that and that's kind of the thing. Like now it's not really part of what they do anymore, which is kind of why I think it's, I think why Matt and I are probably moved on to other things too, so.
Yeah, that's what and I'm glad you brought that up because, you guys have worked in the AAA industry for a good amount of time on hit games. And, now you're taking a step to create your own game. You've founded your own studio and you are taking those elements and those skills that you've acquired over years and you're creating Victory's Grave, Outflank. What was the motivation for that transition, Matt, if you want to start? What made you decide you wanted to do your own thing?
I've always had the idea in the back of my mind of I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to make my own games, kind of like set my own path. And that was really my original goal getting into games in general, was just to learn the industry and at some point break away and form my own studio to some degree and be my own boss. I've always had that drive, and it's just been taking, the last 15 years of career experience to get to this point. But the big motivational factor was just, I thought like now was the time. I felt like I'm tired of like just asking people for roles that I want either within a studio or outside of a studio. I was like, man, I've been doing this for a long time and I got the skills and the experience to do this. Let's just take a shot and do it ourselves.
Yeah.
So Lewis and I, we're like, hell yeah, man, let's do it. Like, let's, I know like all the stuff that we've learned from all the studios that we worked at, like we have that just those eyes on what works and what doesn't. So we bring that into this position for our own studio. Like, I know we can be successful for sure.
And Lewis, what?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it goes on with what we've been saying. Like the kind of games that we like to play are games that feel authentic but are still really accessible, right? Like the early Rainbow Six games, you know, like you were really playing at being one of these people who exist in some form in real life, right? But now, like, whether it's like a Tom Clancy game or whether it's Call of Duty or something where you can play a Snoop Dogg or Nicki Minaj, you know what I mean? Like they've gone more and more. Oh, wait, what do you play? It's like a Ninja Turtle now too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like I kind of want to try that out, honestly. But it's like,
no, I'm
but they keep going more and more towards like Fortnite, towards like these more cartoon stuff. And then on the other side, you have stuff that like Arma, or like Ground Branch or like things that might be a little too hardcore for people. You know what I'm saying? So right now we're trying to we're like this middle point, like, which is a very wide middle, right?
Yep.
Like that's the kind of games that we like to play, but we weren't seeing anybody making them. So rather than just playing the old games, like, we decided we'd start something new.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that middle ground, because the issues that you mentioned and how like Call of Duty, how it started to where it is now, that's been one of the biggest gripes that I've personally had over the years.
Yep.
And I'm like,
100%.
I don't know, is it my age or something? Like, are all the games leaning towards this cartoonish approach where it's like they have to have the latest cartoon character, or crisscrossing brands? And I'm like, well, what is Call of Duty now? Like, I remember the days when I would get online, those lobbies were a little hostile, but I get online with my friends and we were a cooperative team in a cooperative shooter trying to outscore the other team. And I didn't have to worry about, hey, is that Shredder that just ran across the field? I'm busy staring at your skin.
Or like, I feel bad shooting Nicki Minaj.
Right. Like, what did Snoop do to me? So
that's why, I love Snoop. So,
but I love that you guys are bringing it, the accessibility, but keeping it as a squad, as a team, and saying, hey, let's go in the middle. It's like barren here. Can we put something here?
Yeah.
So with Victory's Grave Outflank, how did that concept come to be? How did you guys go, okay, this is the game we want?
Sure. So again, like we've been talking about, Matt and I, we both have worked in the AAA space for like years now, right? Like him, like 15, I've been in it like 10 years. And one thing that AAA games almost always try to do is they try to be all things to all people, right? But like one of the things I quickly learned on Ghost Recon Wildlands is that there's like this segment of the community playing there that loves the game, but they only play the PvP. You know what I mean? So like all this writing and that we've been working on for like years, all the actors and all the mocap and cinematics and stuff, they just skip all that. They ignore that stuff. So like looking at it from a player's point of view, like if that's all I wanted to play, why would I pay for all the rest of it? You know what I mean? So like I can always use the example, it's like cable TV, right? Like I only want to watch, like Westerns on TNT or whatever, right? But then why do I got to pay for CNN and Fox News? Like, I don't watch any of that stuff. You know what I mean? So what we're trying to do with Victory's Grave is instead of having a one game try to be everything, we're going to break it up into smaller games, So Victory's Grave Outflank is just the PvP part. And then later on this year, we're hoping to start pre-production on a more narrative-focused games. That'll, be like a single-player type thing. And, a lot of... but they'll all share the same world, And honestly, like a lot of, let's say, the skills or like the knowledge of how to do this kind of thing, how to structure it, actually comes from like my work in Wildlands Year 2, which had all the different crossovers, which is when they like really tried to make some kind of Clancyverse, at least for a couple of years there. So, so with like Sam Fisher coming in, for anybody who's not played it, like their crossovers with like Sam Fisher came on the Wildlands, some of the Rainbow Six Siege characters came on it. So and it really weaves together like a Clancyverse. So
yeah. I want to jump in, like, so like the work that I did on the Division 1, you could really tell really fast that that's a lot of that stuff's dictated by the higher ups, but a lot of the cool creative stuff comes in between part 1 and part 2. Those are those DLCs in between. And that to me is just like, that's where the fun is. It's where a lot of the unique designs are. That's where a lot of the, you can take a chance on something. Like, have you ever played the survival DLC for the Division 1 at all?
I didn't play the
Have you heard
survival
of it?
DLC.
You got to, man.
It's so good.
You
But
got
I
to.
have it,
it's
and I
basically- yeah.
never played it.
It's the original. I would say, I don't know, like I need to go back and look at the dates, but maybe I think it came before something like a Tarkov. I don't even remember the first like real extraction shooter, but this was like one of the first takes on it where everyone, started with the same amount of gear. You had to find stuff, work your way to the center, and then pop a flare and extract. And that was so cool. And like as a level designer, I love that because like I could make the world far more creative. I could put my thumbprint on something. I could make it just super unique, and the community ate it up, and it was really well received. It's just that Ubisoft has shareholders, and they got crazy amount of studios to manage, so they have to, like, if we can contract Nicki Minaj or Snoop Dogg or something, that makes them a return. But the stuff that really becomes unique is just between the cracks, and that's where I think we have the huge advantage with what we're doing. Is like we're not necessarily following these trends, and I don't want to follow the trend because I think that's, you're trying to compete with, these guys have just been around, how many versions of Far Cry are there? How many versions of Call of Duty are there? How many versions of Battlefield? These people have years, if not decades and decades of experience, of a head start on us. But if we can come up with a new concept, a new kind of interesting take on an old formula, but kind of really put a new modern polish on it, it's going to really pop. And I think that the market is ripe for this because people are just, they're, like you said, they're seeing the same thing over and over, and they just want to feel something different, but familiar. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And when I went and I checked out the game, one of the features that you guys have, and I was like, okay, now I have to try this, was before the battle begins, the real battle begins. It's, planning your foxholes and setting things up. And it gave me an End War kind of feel. Because I was a huge fan of End War. And I felt that game was ahead of its time. And I was like, man, if they could just redo this now, I'd be totally for it. But I love that it's not just a drop teams in and shoot to the end. Like, you have to think before the match even begins.
100%.
What made you guys decide to go in that direction? Because I think it's amazing.
For me, I've played so many of these, fast-paced Twitch action shooters that it becomes so repetitious that where the player is going to be by the time they come around that corner. If I pop a grenade, boom, I'll get at least 2 kills. I come around the corner, someone's going to be in this corner. It was so repetitious. So those players that came in with that, fresh eyes that never really looked at this game before, they're wrecked. They have no shot. And I always found, like, whenever a new map or new DLC or something came out, I always felt like, hey, I actually outsmarted these people. I read the room. I understood the map because it was fresh to everybody. We all kind of had that fresh take. So then it's like those that take a time to look at the map, kind of understand which route is best. How do they set up an ambush? How do they go about? Then this rewards those type of players. And I thought, okay, like a map that is always evolving, players can change it, based off of how they want to either defend or attack. To me, that was just like the map becomes something fresh every time. There'll be a meta that forms, like, oh, they always put a booby trap here. They always move the objective over here, X, Y, and Z. Like, but once you start to understand the meta, then you can start to, like at the game of football, you start to, like, oh, everyone's doing West Coast offense. No problem. We'll just do, blitzes and everything. We'll just pressure the quarterback constantly. So it's like you have to adapt to the changing landscape. And that to me that's the connection that I've always wanted with games. That's the hook that keeps me coming back, is it's always something new.
So, you guys are doing the PvP first, and then you mentioned some work in the future. Can you tell us a little bit more about what might come after the PvP?
Yeah, sure. So again, like right now, again, we haven't even entered pre-production right now. We're still like batting around concepts. But right now we have attached as creative director, Christian Devine. He's a game writer. He's most known, I guess, for writing Life is Strange. Yeah. So again, like if you're going to go narrative, just try and find like the best writer you can. So like, and the impact of, that story, those stories is kind of undeniable. Like we actually met while we were both working on Dying Light 2. I think it was really just DLCs that I was working on. So I don't know if you've actually played anything I worked on in that. I don't think I'd even made it into the game. But yeah, so, we just stayed in touch, after, getting friendly there. And, like, again, kind of with the way, so the world that we've set up is basically like, it's set in like the end of 1984, like there's been like a huge global blackout, right? So 84 is like middle of the Cold War. So in Europe, you got like NATO on one side of the Iron Curtain, you got Warsaw Pact guys on the other side of the Iron Curtain. Nobody knows what's going on. They're not getting any communication from anybody. So what do? They go do Joe logic. They just start shooting, right? So like eventually like NATO pushes to the east. The Soviet Union kind of crumbles because, as we now know, like they didn't really have all the resources, all the strength that they advertised, right? But then this is now, boom, like, okay, so we've won the Cold War, but now like people are dying off because there's no electricity, like because if there's no electricity, you're not running hospitals, you're not storing food, you're losing all your medicine, right? So like all these soldiers and former soldiers out there, they're either like still trying to do their mission, or they're just like, well, let's just be bandits, or like I'm going to be a freaking warlord in Eastern Poland or something. Or like if they're local soldiers, they're like, all right, we're going to form a militia for our own town, right? Mm-hmm. So, but in this context, like there's like it's a whole universe. Like there's a wealth of different stories that you could do there, So like it's giving Christian like honestly like too many different options as to what he could do. Like so. Like he tends in a lot of his writing, he tends to like have younger protagonists. So we're talking about that a lot, so like in Life is Strange 2, there's his two brothers, so it could be probably less superpowers going on because we're not really going that science fiction, right? But, like it'll be probably younger characters and kind of like how this kind of thing would affect them. So,
okay. So what are some of the difficulties you guys have been running into? As I said earlier, as a gamer, we see the finished product, and I'm guilty of this as well. We get the game and we go like, oh, there's a bug here, like there's a Bethesda bug. Why is my guy spinning in a circle? Why is he T-posing? Because we don't understand what's happening behind the scenes, like in level design, and oh my goodness, what's up with the writing. We don't understand that you guys might say, hey, here's an idea, here's a concept, and then it gets all the way to shareholders and like, nah, don't do that. And we don't, we don't know what's going on. So like from when you were working at Ubisoft and other studios, what issues did you run into, and what issues are you running into while running your own studio? If you want to start off, Matt.
Yeah, I think from what we're trying to deal with is finding our style. Like we have a vision, we have an idea of which way we want to go, but honing that in, like narrowing that down, both combat and narrative and world and animation, whatever you can think of, just finding that as to separate ourselves from what's already out there. Again, not so much that we become unrecognizable and it's like a turnoff, but finding that balance, that middle ground, I think is key for me. And like, this is something I've seen throughout most of my gaming career is we pretty much have a solid idea of when it comes to the PvP structure, which way we want to go. But when I've seen, and what we're working on currently, but what I've seen in the AAA space, well, I'll take it back to my first, game industry experience at Crytek. I worked on Rise, Son of Rome, and like that game went through 3, maybe 4 iterations until it finally became that God of War style clone that it became in the end. And this is just because like the CEO just like came into the office like, I watched Gladiator last night. Let's make a game about that. Okay, how do we do that? Like, what do we do? Like, so then everyone scrambles. Try this. And we show it to them. No, not that. So they go through this massive, just process. And I think it's a huge waste of money trying to find the game concept. And so for us, it's like, we got the concept, we have the world, we just need to find how we fit. So,
and Lewis, what about you?
Yeah, if I take it back to, just the beginning of my career at Ghost Recon Wildlands, a lot of it is just that, like I was given this, so this kind of parallels like why we're here, where we are. Like I was given this mandate of like, write it like it's real, right? So little did they know what real was going to be like. So that's the thing. So the writing, and I recognize completely that the writing in Ghost Recon Wildlands is like divides people. Like they either love it or they hate it, and just switch it off, right? So, but like some of the best, like some of the comments that I've gotten from veterans is that I've appreciated the most are when they say that, yeah, like that was the most realistic part of the game, and it's because like, like even like from the SF point of view, like in the 82nd, like I would often work with those guys, be trained by them, like get to know them personally. I've been like to their homes, so like got beat up by a few of them in Brazilian too, you know what I mean? That was the wrong class to join. but anyway, like so now, like where we're at now, like it's a different space now. Like now we're trying to find the authentic, and like let's be honest, like there are reasons why Call of Duty has become much more like Fortnite, or why like the niche stuff has become more niche. It's because it is hard to distinguish yourself in that middle area.
Yeah.
And it like, and again, a lot of it comes back to like, oh, how are you getting your funding? So like if people see like, okay, Fortnite's doing really well, let's put the Ninja Turtles in our game. You know what I'm saying? Like then okay, then it just becomes like a pragmatic decision from a financial point of view. So like for us being like a smaller studio, smaller project, it becomes a double-edged sword because for an investor coming to us, there's not going to be as big of a risk, right? We're not trying to mess with any $200 million budgets over here. Like we're just like, okay, well, you get us 5, we'll be good for like 3 years. You know what I'm saying? So, but like, but at the same time, it's like, how do you attract those people? You know what I mean? So it's especially now, like, this is getting a little inside baseball, but like with a lot of the funding that was going into games, especially the last few years, like, so video game like funding has actually increased over the last like year, I guess, but a lot of that investment is going to this like AI funded, like these tools or AI games. So it's really more in the AI space as much as it's in the video game space. So that is one of the big issues we're having now. Is just like honing in on basically like finding the right people to partner with to make our game successful and to find the right audience.
I know, and you mentioned AI, and I know Daniel and I have talked about AI and how it can be a useful tool, but how it shouldn't be involved in everything. And you guys are very clear on like AI not being, writing. You guys try to, keep everything, I guess you could say, homegrown.
For sure.
So like, what are your thoughts on the industry leaning so hard into AI? With video games, it's kind of scary in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, for me, from my point of view, it is a tool. You know what I mean? Like it was actually really funny. Like, so Grok 3 just came out, right? So my brother was actually just like, he was like wargaming on it, just like asking it, okay, well, what would happen if like the Ranger Battalion went against like Russian VDV, like, which is like the airborne over there, like the equivalent. And it just kept going and like extrapolating stuff. But like you end up seeing like a limit to its logic. You know what I mean? So it can be a very useful tool, I mean, at this point, it's like not every good technology, like, or not every technology, even if it's like bad or good, like actually makes it, right? Like,
right.
I don't have a 3D TV. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if either of you guys do, but remember when that was like huge, like you couldn't walk into any store without seeing those, but like nobody's using those now, right? So again, a lot is going to come down to the market and if people find it useful, not whether or not people like it, like for better or worse. So, but yeah, like, I mean, the end product will always end up being in the hands of people. That's kind of where it comes down to.
Which game studio was it that had that 6-finger Santa Claus picture? Was that Call of Duty? That it was the AI generated Santa Claus picture with 6 fingers on it, and they like
AI, yeah. Anything that has 6 fingers,
it
is
made it into the game too. I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was Call of Duty.
Okay.
I might be wrong, but that to me is like, that's nothing I want to ever do right there. It should always, like Lewis said, it should be a tool to kind of get you off to a good start. And once you find your foundation, then you replace the AI with the human touch. And in the same way,
Yeah.
like a lot of people are, really annoyed at like marketplace asset flips where they're just,
Mhm.
I made a cool game and they put it on marketplace for early access for like $20. And it's literally just crap that they bought off the marketplace and they didn't put any real of their own touches in there. That's just going about it wrong, in my opinion. You should use that as a foundation to kind of set the tone, get your bearings, and work with the concept that you have. But then you got to gut that system and rebuild what you have based off of what you know. And that's, I think, how AI should be used. And I think some studios are getting away with it, some studios aren't. And yeah, we'll see. We'll see where the future takes us with AI.
Hopefully it doesn't get out of hand because
Yeah, it
like
could.
you said, with the images that pop up now, and I use AI as a tool, but that's because
Yeah.
my team is small. There's like 3 of us. So it's like,
Yep.
But that's the thing. That's the
You have
key
to.
thing. That's the key point, is that now what I think AI is going to do is it will make like development teams smaller, and the smaller teams will be able to achieve more. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I'm just not going to discount that, especially the space we're in right now.
For sure.
Like, I don't know if you guys have seen any of these guys they're posted on X. Like, they'll just take a couple days and use Grok to just make a whole 3D game with like AI in it, and they'll do it in like days.
Saw that the other day. Yep. Crazy.
Yeah, and it's like no one would ever mistake it for anything other than a prototype, though. You know what I mean? Unless it's one of the people that just remakes Pac-Man, right? But like, in which case they just think it's like 40 years old.
yeah,
But again, it's a useful tool. I think there are going to be a lot of times when you might have an idea, but you don't have the time or the money to like really prototype it, and an AI could prove useful.
That's right.
well, I guess we'll find out in the future. Speaking of prototypes and everything, when are you guys thinking about making Outflank available? What is your hopeful timeline? I don't want guys don't stick them with a severe timeline. When is your hopeful timeline?
Okay, well, we're really hoping to. So right now we're working towards the vertical slice, so it's going to be like one battlefield, right? Like one level that we're really hoping to get to a pretty high quality, right? So if and when that works out, then we're really hoping to have an early access release. So like a real beta. It'll still be really polished, but at the same time, we want to be able to get that feedback from players, to really get it all the features like working well. Especially because there are a lot of team-based kind of features, So like even in a controlled internal playtest with teams, like you're not gonna get what you have when you have like the public playing, right? But we're hoping to get to early access within a year, and if and when we get the funding, that'll be able to happen.
Awesome. Now, Matt, this is a question for you because you've worked on level design for many years. How do you go about when you are creating a map, especially for a team-based thing? That's like a whole different ball game from like a single-player game. How do you figure out the design of your map, especially when you've got to take you're taking real-world places and you're putting them in a game and they've got to be destructive. They've got to have tactical points. Like, how do you figure that out?
Yeah, a lot of it, you basically look at the structure of what the game that you're making that level based in does, and like the rules sets of that. Like with the Division, it was a 4-player co-op with the player-driven campaign. So it's like, okay, we understand this. We understand it's set in real-world spaces. We just we have to set stages and different like gates for, okay, if one player enters the space, this is how many AIs spawn and have, a certain logic for that. If 2 players enter the space, we increase the AI amount. We have them coming from different directions. So there's tons of different variables. Iteration is what really matters. You can't just sit, with one design, one idea that you made and think that it's going to stick forever. It's going to evolve. It's going to change. And it's constantly testing, constantly playing it, constantly working on it, constantly adding, constantly talking to people. But yeah, with what we're doing, like it's all coming down from us. And so for me, it's like that was understood for me from the get-go. So I made that 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer level in about a month and a half because I had already known that this is what I kind of wanted to achieve from an environment space-wise. And then for each point of interest that we're fighting over, I understood like we could take different approaches. Like I use, different Call of Duty levels from Call of Duty 1 and Call of Duty 2 as inspirations for the layout, the base layout of just like how I want it to feel and flow. But obviously it's going to take on a shape of its own, and that's a whole part of the process. You can literally have like Dust 2 from Counter-Strike, copy and paste that into Tom Clancy's, Rainbow Six Siege, and it's going to change. It's not going to be the same. You'll recognize a lot of stuff, but it won't play the same because the game is different. So you have to really revolve your design around what your game is that you're designing it for. And that just takes a lot of practice. Like you have to like and understand the game that you're working on. So,
okay. And since you guys are now, officially in an indie development studio, I know, I myself have been toying with the idea of stepping into that realm. So here's a great opportunity to get some wisdom from you guys on, some pitfalls that, people might not realize are coming, some things to look out for, skills to improve upon. Like what nuggets of wisdom would you give someone like me who's completely unaware of what's waiting on the other side, gamer to developer?
For sure.
I'd say don't wait, man. Just freaking do it. You know what I mean? Like honestly, or like if you are afraid of, like if you don't have any experience as a developer, I think one thing that can be helpful is, just helping people out with their projects. Like especially after I got out of the military, like trying to get back into film, one of the best ways to do it, like I wasn't going to be able to start my own thing from scratch right there. But one of the best ways to get back into it was to help people I knew with their projects, right? So you help people out with that, like you end up learning a heck of a lot. You end up meeting a lot of people, learning a lot of different, and, learning, and then you'll be able to learn from other people's mistakes, frankly, just like Matt and I've learned from the mistakes that, people have made at the AAA studios we worked at, right? But yeah, I mean, so this is one thing that I keep saying. So I got 2 teenage boys, right? So one of the things I keep telling them is that you're not going to know everything. You just got to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. So like nobody knows shit really. Like, you know what I mean? Like the industry's always changing, like players are always changing. The technology is always changing. We're talking about all that stuff here right now, like 5 years ago, nobody would have predicted that, we'd have to be like coders would be competing with AI for their jobs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, just get into it, just jump in, maybe like make sure there's a lifeline so you don't, in case, you can't swim, right?
Yeah.
But, like I wouldn't like bet your life on it necessarily, but just go ahead, just go for it,
Yeah. Yeah, I'd totally echo that for sure. One thing I'd say is the type of developer you want to be, you should probably figure that out pretty quickly to some degree, like find where you thrive. Like that for me, I noticed really, really early on in school when I was going to school for game design, that when we hit the level design class, for some reason, everyone was struggling. And for me, I was like, this is so easy. Like, why is everyone complaining? Well, when we got to the character modeling class, God help me, I hated every moment of that. I was just like, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to build the world. And so
the world.
Yeah, but some people love that. So finding that part and not necessarily I can't tell you how many like interns and other people I've talked to about their portfolio. They'll have like 20 pieces of 20 different things. It's like, okay, which one do you like? Which one are you good at? And like, if you can't tell me that, then you might want to either narrow that down, or maybe game development is not necessarily for you, because it's a team-based, industry. Like you have to, like Lewis said, you have to rely, you have to fail, and your teammates are there to help you out. That's why, some people are good with coding, some people are good with animation, some people are good with level design, but you find your niche, you find your corner, but then you find your team of people to help out. And then from there, you can really, break in, because people will need your help. Like regardless of, all I do is, paint textures all day for 3D models. I don't do anything else. Perfect. We need that. We need so many textures. Like, come on. So not being a jack of all trades, I'd say really hone in on being a specialist and really polish that portfolio so you can showcase and put your good stuff at the top, and show your work and your iteration and what you've learned and how you've grown.
But if you're looking at it as just like a studio, like you want to release your own kind of games, right? Like one thing that we did, which was actually we learned a lot from, I feel, is we released a Fortnite Island, right? Like it was like it was really like not labor intensive. I think it was like built in like a couple days or something. But we were able to test out certain things, and you also just learn. So we could see like how players would react to this kind of thing like immediately, you know. So like one of the things we did, like it was just a PvP thing, but we like limited like a lot of the movement stuff, so you couldn't really like jump and things like that, and like we limited how much you could build and the kind of weapons that you could get, just to kind of see like what would happen, you know. So it's something that I actually like I picked up from another like developer, like who's like they mostly do code development stuff, but they also wanted to test out some ideas, so they made like a boss battle or something, you know. So like honestly, like that's like the Fortnite Islands and Roblox, like those are really low barrier entries to like getting into game development. So anybody interested in that can do that stuff. And they should, because then they will learn about, you know, level design and character design and other kind of mechanics as well.
Yeah, modifying the games that you play, man. I think if you're passionate about that game and you know it, get in the tools, see what you can do, change the settings, fiddle around.
I'm glad that you specify getting and figuring out your niche, because I tried my hand at level design for a little bit, and I was kind of like how you were with the character design. Like I tried with Bryce when that was the thing. And I was like, I know how I want the world to look, but trying to learn all these tools, I was just like,
So that is the hardest part, learning the tools for sure.
Yeah, I was learning the tools, and I was like, all right, well, maybe I'll try character design using Daz. And I was like, that isn't it. But I think I kind of fall in more like with you, Lewis, where like writing, now that's my jam. I've got tons and tons of stories. I've got concepts, and I'm just like, you need a world? I got you. You need more? I got you.
All right, so that's a whole other bag that you've opened. So, because a lot, like honestly, a lot of the game writing, because game writing always just serves the gameplay, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I didn't like come up with Sam Fisher, right? But I had to put him in a story. You know what I'm saying? And like there are mechanics that came along with that. You know, certain gameplay mechanics that came with that. So for me, the writing is always where the player meets the game. You see what I'm saying? So like I always use the example like Super Mario Brothers, right? Whether you're playing Super Mario Brothers 2 or whether you're playing Mario Kart, it's Mario, right? And there's like a story there. Like, you know, like Mario's got some ex-girlfriend around Super Mario Kart or something, right? That brunette, right?
Yeah,
I can't remember her name.
Always getting kidnapped somehow.
Yeah, and then Princess Peaches or whatever. But, you know, like, so, you know, like putting in a narrative context makes it like a kind of a human context for whatever the gameplay is, you know? So it's not just, you know, touching icons in like some geometric world. You see what I'm saying? It's actually like collecting gold or whatever. So honestly, like a lot of the high level like story stuff, a lot of that is actually, you know, if it's like a new game, you know, a lot of those decisions and things are actually handled in marketing, you know? So like, and being in the space you are, it's actually not a bad, you know, way to transition to marketing either, right?
Absolutely.
So, you know.
How much is marketing actually involved in game development? And please, because for years, and Daniel's been like this too, we're like, does most of the budget go to marketing? Because Call of Duty's commercials, and even with Breakpoint, I think you guys had like an 11-minute thing with Lil Wayne. I was just like,
that's right.
So can you please clear the air? How much is marketing actually involved in game development?
Okay, so I won't say any names of any games, right? But there was a game I worked on that had $100 million budget, and the marketing budget was also $100 million. So, yeah. So marketing, they have a lot of say, you know, because at the end of the day, like if somebody wants to go play a Sonic game, you know, a Sonic the Hedgehog game, like how do players going to identify what that is? And a lot of that comes from marketing. Now, I mean, that's the way it's been in a lot of different industries for a long time, right? Like you think of New Coke, you know, that's a marketing gimmick. That's just Coke with more sugar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. So, but that's the thing. Like, so a lot of decisions, good or bad, can come from marketing, you know? So again, like that's as a writer in the AAA space, like I've been lucky enough to collaborate with marketing a lot of times. Like I've worked on like a lot of some of the trailers that you probably like all the Breakpoint trailers. I wrote many of them, not the live action ones, but I either wrote or like oversaw the writing of many of those other ones. So, like, and as a developer, you want to work with marketing. You want the players to know what the game is going to be. You want it to be an accurate representation too. So because very often, and then this happens a lot, like the game that you're sold is not the game that you're playing, that you get at the end of the day. And that'll piss off a lot of players and have them be like, well, screw this, I'm not going to play number 6 when it comes out because number 5 lied to me. So.
Yeah.
If you think unless about you're Call of Duty, because apparently they can get away with it, and we keep coming back.
Yeah. Marketing actually had a huge say when it came to the development of the Division 1. Like I was just a level designer on that team, but they literally Microsoft came in. Like the Division 1 was originally supposed to be in Peru. Like I don't know, a little nugget drop there. It was supposed to be like a competitor. It was a PC point and click MMO. Like click on it's like Tom Clancy's version of the Old Republic is what we were originally working on. Well, however, Microsoft came in and dropped a bucket ton of money and said, we'll cover all the marketing, but the location is going to be someplace iconic, and that's New York City. Like, so basically they had all the say to say it's going to be New York. That's final because it's the most PR, it's the most, marketable city in the world. Like everyone recognizes it. It's like the moment you look at that's a screenshot. So they had that power to literally dictate the entire environment and story behind where the Division became, like where it started.
Oh, good old Microsoft coming and dropping the bucket of money.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
So the Division 1 came out and the Division 2 was like right on its heels.
Yes.
Why?
Money, that's why. So in AAA development, your first release of a new IP is usually not the moneymaker. That's usually where you lose a lot because you're developing the IP, you're trying to set a new narrative standard, a new emotional standard, new characters, new world, everything. So you use a lot of that budget to develop that idea, push it to create the new functionality, the new gameplay. But once the gameplay is there and everyone loves it, well, they're obviously going to buy part 2, right? So you can take what you learn and everything that you know from part 1. I'm not going to say copy paste, but pretty much copy paste the functionality, the core, paste it into a new world, and then let's just reskin it, put a new city. Okay, Washington D.C. We're going to do that now, and like this will be the new take on it. And then we're going to go to Lower Manhattan with the expansions and DLCs. Like it's easier for a developer to say, okay, it's going to sell. Let's go. We have the code. Let's just update it with what we learned with part 1. And we're going to sell the same amount of copies, but with the, half or less than half of the budget.
So kind of in the same vein of talking budget and the money makers, what are your gentlemen's thoughts on a lot of games going live service? I know that.
Again, that definition gets like kind of tricky these days as well, So a game, because this is the thing, like a game that you never actually own, you know what I mean? That's one thing. Like, and obviously I've worked on games like that where and players, they recognize this, so they're like, okay, so when support for this game ends, I'm not going to have anything to play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a real thing, especially because this is one of the things that I think a lot of people working in the industry, or even like who are really into the industry or really into gaming, with a lot of people don't realize is that some people, they only buy one game a year,
A friend like that.
Exactly, right? So they want to own that game, like that. There's a lot of decision that goes in. Honestly, I think a lot of it is because like my kids, they're teenagers, they're gonna buy a game. You know what I mean? They're gonna buy one game because that's what the kind of cash they have, right? So, and I was the same way when I was young, right? So yeah, so when you turn it into a live service thing, which is, it gets a little trickier because then it also comes into like what aspects are live service. Like, does it have lots of free updates? Because like Wildlands Year 2, I think Wildlands Year 2 did it really well. There's a lot of free stuff that came that kept keeping people engaged. You know what I mean? A lot of this was obviously towards the eye of the next eyes towards the next game, so that, you know, when the next game came out, of course they're going to buy the next one, right? Because they've still been playing this game for like two years after it came out, right? But again, like the experience that people would get in you know, that year too was still a very full experience. So I don't know. I'm not against it. Like, what parts do you not like about it? You know what I'm saying? That's probably the better way to address your question, right?
Yeah.
So what is it?
I guess because, like you said, the ownership. You know, we're old school gamers. So when I went to the GameStop and I bought my game, it was mine. Like, yeah, I know I don't own the rights to it, but that game could never be taken away from me.
Exactly.
You know, that experience could never be taken away from me. And a game like, I guess, you know, Destiny 2 is a great example. And they think we forgot. I remember paying for my copy of Destiny 2. And then they went live service. And I'm like, okay, well, what about the people who paid for the game? When you're done, we're just forgotten. You know, we can't go back and play it. And, you know, they lean really heavy into, you know, transactions. If Daniel was here, he would tell you he is not a fan of microtransactions. And, you know, we understand that the microtransactions paid for those free updates. And at least that's what we thought. But then you see a game like No Man's Sky that, you know, came out in 2016 and for almost 10 years is dropping full expansions for free. And then you have to ask your question, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What's happening here?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so a lot of that, I think, is how they use their budget, right? So like a lot of, like, they either planned on having an update, like we're planning on having updates. We're trying to like make sure that we don't release without the budget for those, right? But then like a lot of the microtransaction stuff, see, like, because I'm like of two minds about it, right? So like if somebody wants to get that cool looking skin, like, you know, but it's something that's not for everybody, you know, like, you know, they're willing to pay for it, why not, right? But like things like loot boxes, I'm really against, you know what I mean? Like
game changers, man.
Things that really are just like gambling. So again, like I'm a dad, so of course, like whenever my kids like, oh, can I buy these loot boxes? I'm like, hell no. So like, I'm not teaching you to like gamble like that. Yeah. You know, you gotta learn poker, real freaking game.
You gotta make your money back, man.
Yeah. So
yeah, I would say I'm not so solid with my opinion on it quite yet. I do understand it though, because if I think about how many copies of Madden that I bought throughout my lifetime, and those aren't, I can't use those anymore either. It's like, but if they're going to come out like Madden NFL, and it's not even like a new game every year, it's just like a subscription, and then you're always getting there's no Madden 26, 27, 28. It's always just Madden. In the same way that like FIFA switched to FC, and now I'm assuming that that's going to go down that route too. And if you think about, I'm hoping Rainbow Six Siege kind of can set this up to where they're going with Rainbow Six X like after 10 years, and it's just like, okay, it's not part 2, and that's what they specifically said. It's absolutely not part 2. They're not trying to divide their community, and I think that's key. Is like, because if if you're a big fan of Madden 23, Madden 24 comes out, and it's like they changed a lot of stuff. You're not gonna want to log in. You're gonna stick with yours, and it divides your communities. But if the game is like, it's like a Netflix service where everyone's logging into the same app. It's always updated to the same part. Like that to me, I see, but again, the ownership part sucks because maybe there'd be like some type of like either grandfather clause. If you bought the disc, you can, you're always in. Or
again, like, but our plans for Outflank, for Victor's of Outflank, just to be really clear, is for people to own the game. Like we like, it's a PvP game, and we absolutely like we'll plan on having servers to host matches. But like, if people want to have their own matches somewhere where they like tweak stuff, you know what I mean? Where it's just like, okay, everyone only gets 5 bullets or whatever, you know what I mean? Whatever they want to do, like, absolutely. Like, we want to be able to empower players to do that kind of thing, because that, again, that's the kind of stuff that we came up with on, you know what I mean? It would be like LAN parties with Halo. It'd be like, all right, nobody gets a sniper rifle this time. You know what I mean? Or everybody gets a sniper rifle.
Handguns only 1 bullet.
Yeah.
GoldenEye, no odd job, GoldenEye.
Yeah.
So I know you guys have it available for early access on Steam. Is it going to become available anywhere else in the future?
I mean, that's a hope. That's a bit, you know what I mean? Like right now, we're trying to find a publisher to work with, you know, like one to make sure that the game gets in as many people's hands as possible, you know, because everybody wants that for their game, right? So we want to be able to find the right audience who want to get that. But you know, yeah, like 100%. Like if we could get it on other platforms, we would. But it's not something. One, it's not our expertise. You know what I'm saying? Like, so we want people who are good at it. But it's also costly. Like one thing that you don't understand is that to even get your game tested by like PlayStation to see if it gets the gold or whatever to be able to be released, like that costs like $200,000 right there. Yep. You know what I mean? And that's more than our budget for Vertical Slice.
I've heard you're almost as a new studio, if you're not a part of the PlayStation Network, you're almost guaranteed to fail the first time. They'll not approve you, and you got to hit it again with the tweaks and the adjustments. This is something that's like kept a lot of people out of the AAA space. Like even going to console, it's why I look at PC is like the Android of the world. Like you got a lot of apps on here, a lot of crazy apps, but you can do it for free. Whereas, you know, the App Store on Apple iPhone is like your Xbox and your PlayStation. You got to go through this approval process, but it's going to cost you.
Yeah, I had a feeling it was harder to get on console than it is to get on PC.
Yeah, I mean, and there are code changes that have to happen too, you know, like, and those are that like I was saying, that's not our wheelhouse. There are actually some studios out there that's all they do is port, or that's like their specialty, you know, and if and when we get there, I'm sure we'll be like working with some of them, but you know, that's not in our immediate plan. It's not in our 1-year plan, let's say.
Yeah, that takes a bit of growth to reach that level.
Well, for anyone who's trying to support you guys, where can they find you?
Sure. So right now we're actually doing an equity crowdfund, you know, so it's similar to like what people would see on like WeFunder or Start Engine with those tech things. We're going through this platform called Fola Capital, which is they're focused on veteran-owned businesses. But people can just go to oldglorystudios.us, and we have links to that stuff there, as well as like links to our Steam page for the game and all our socials too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So final thought, because I know you guys you're very busy gentlemen. You're creating an amazing thing here. What else do you have on your, I guess you could say, future wish list for Old Glory Studios? Like, what could we expect from you guys in the future? Because like I said, I checked out, you know, what you guys displayed for Outflank, and I'm loving it. And I'm already curious, like, hey, what are they going to do? Ubisoft has let me down lately.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like. No, so at least in the near future anyway, we'll say like the you know, we are trying to establish like Victory's Grave as like a whole story world, you know. So one of the things that we're working on is like a tabletop RPG, you know, that will probably like release like a free like web, you know, like a PDF version, hopefully in the next few months. So just to introduce people to the world, you know what I mean, to understand like what it is there, because you know, like I feel like in a lot of, let's say, AAA games, you know, or even something like For Honor, right, which is really a PvP game, but then they tack on a little like 6-hour like single-person campaign just to explain what the world is, right? You know, or what was it? Apex Legends had all the like, you know, the commercials that they were basically like short cartoons, right? Yep. So for us, we're going to do that with, you know, like the tabletop RPG that'll introduce this kind of post-apocalyptic world like set in the 80s. We'll see like if people manage to get to see Ghostbusters or not before like the apocalypse happened. You know what I mean? So stuff like that.
Yeah, and with Outflank, nothing's set in stone. I'm not going to drop any names, but some decent esports teams we're talking with about that too. So in collaboration with that to develop the game alongside them.
See, and Daniel missed out on that because he's huge on the esports.
If you only knew what's coming, man. If you only knew what's coming.
Yeah.
I'm personally excited, and I'm so glad that I got to talk to you both. I'm gonna rub this in Daniel's face. I'm gonna be like, "Hey, man, you shouldn't have lost. You know, you got to handle your power better so you can attend this." But I would love to be able to talk to you guys again in the future as things progress for Old Glory Studios. But Lewis, Matt, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with me today. Guys, go check it out. Go check them out. Visit their studio and please support Victory Grave Outflank. It looks amazing. And I love that you guys keep everybody in the loop. You guys have a newsletter. So no one is like asking questions. A lot of devs, they'll just stop communicating with their community, but you guys aren't doing that. So go and check it out. And wherever you're listening to this, subscribe, like, get more episodes of the Jeezy Chop Shop Podcast, jeezychopshoppodcast.com. Anyway, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you guys so much. And you guys take care of yourself and each other. We'll catch all you wonderful people on the next podcast. Later.